This is Noah Diffenbaugh in Earth Sciences and the Woods Institute for the Environment here at Stanford University. And I'm very excited to have the opportunity to discuss flight behavior by Barbara Kingsolver with you. So one big issue in the book that's also come up in the discussion is climate change and global warming, and how global warming may be affecting the weather in different parts of the world. And so the things I wanted to say are that, one, we know that global warming is occurring. This is an observation. It's not a matter of opinion or a matter of political preference. It's simply an observation. We also know that global warming that has been observed is also being expressed in climate changes in many parts of the world. And one of the areas where we have really well-established new information over the last decade or so is the ways in which extreme events are being affected by this global warming. And in the United States, there are a number of kinds of extremes that are becoming more frequent. The occurrence of severe hot events, the occurrence of heavy downpours, heavy rainfall events, the occurrence of extreme sea level events when there are storm surges as a result of the rising sea level. So extremes have been well studied in the scientific literature over the last decade or so. In the book, there is an extreme event, and this is this unusually warm winter that's described by Kingsolver that the town of Featherton is experiencing and keeps getting commented on in the book. And then with regard to the butterflies, becomes these warm winter conditions and how long they will last become a major feature of the science in the book. So I wanted to say a couple things about the variability and whether or not we can detect changes in the occurrence of extremes when they're so noisy. So we know that climate varies from year to year. One winter may be warmer or colder than the last, and we know, for example, that in the eastern United States this year there was an extremely cold winter, even though the rest of the globe was actually quite warm. So January of 2014 was one of the warmest Januaries on record. So the point is really about signal-to-noise ratio and detecting the signal within a very noisy time series. And we're familiar with this. People who read the box scores in baseball or follow ESPN or other sports news channels know that a player's performance varies from day to day. And really, it's the overall long-term performance and any trends in that performance that matter for the player's effectiveness. People who follow the stock market know that individual stocks or an aggregate index like the Dow Jones or S&P 500, that these will vary day to day and month to month, and it's really the long-term trend that signifies the direction of the stock market or the direction of an individual stock. And this is the same with the climate system. So we know that global warming is occurring even though there is variability from year to year. And we know that many kinds of extremes are changing even though there's variability from year to year. And in fact, with warm winters, we know that cold extremes have, in many parts of the United States, we're seeing warming of cold extremes. For example, the number of frost days decreasing, the minimum temperature increasing in a number of areas of the United States. This doesn't mean that there won't still be cold winters. And in fact, the cold winter that we saw this year in the eastern United States is not inconsistent with what we expect from global warming. That noise in the climate system means that we'll still see cold winters. But the question for the butterflies is really how often is there an abnormally warm winter? And that's certainly something that's consistent with what we're seeing in the scientific literature. The second topic that I wanted to touch on is the role of advocacy, and the topic of advocacy and art came up in the comments in a really interesting way. And I hadn't occurred to me. I hadn't thought about this question of whether someone can pursue their art simultaneously integrated with advocacy. But while I haven't thought about it in the context of art, it's something that we face a lot as climate scientists on a day-to-day basis, really. So we are often asked to communicate with the public, decision makers, and the broader public. As a publicly funded scientist, a portion of my research program is funded by the public. I feel it's a real responsibility. The government who's giving the grants feels it's a responsibility for me to communicate with the public. So we're faced with this question of communication, and in fact, it comes up in the book. Dr. Ovid Byron makes a number of statements about his role as a scientist to characterize the way that the world is, to characterize whether or not there are trends, whether or not there are changes in the way the world is. But it's not his responsibility or his role to tell people what to do. And I certainly feel that way in my own work in understanding the climate system, that I have a responsibility to communicate with the public and decision makers when asked, but that it's not my role to advocate for any particular policy outcome, any behavioral outcome. So I'm interested to hear your reactions to that, what your reactions are to the way that it's portrayed in the book, what your reactions are to what I've just said. So those are two areas that I wanted to touch on in this video response. It's been really exciting for me to get to read all of your thoughts about the book. I hope that you have some reactions to my comments, and I look forward to getting to have an online discussion with those who are interested via this video face-to-face hangouts later in the month. So thank you all, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.